All right, so you guys wanted to know more about this Trump inauguration, and let me tell you, there is so much to cover.
Yeah, there's a ton.
We got news articles, we got live updates, all kinds of different sources, and they all kind of paint a different picture of what's going on here.
It's pretty wild.
It is wild. This is historic, and just to kind of set the stage for everybody, this isn't like a normal inauguration.
Right, this is nuts.
This is like uncharted territory.
Yeah, he's coming back for a second non-consecutive term. I mean, he lost to Biden in 2021, faced all those criminal charges, and now he's back.
And he's launching his own cryptocurrency, like, right before taking office.
Yeah, just days before.
It's called Trump and P. Like, come on.
That's a bold move for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to think about this. Other world leaders have had their business dealings while in office, but
Yeah.
this is different. This is next level. We're talking about potential conflicts of interest. Like, could he profit from his own policies?
It's a really good question to be asking.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what this inauguration actually looks like.
Oh.
So he's back in Washington, but instead of the usual fanfare, it's a much smaller, more private celebration at his golf club in Virginia before the official ceremony.
Oh, wow. So different from his first inauguration. Remember that?
I do.
I mean, massive protests, huge crowds this time. It's much more controlled. Even got some big names attending these pre-inauguration events, like Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah. What's up with that?
I don't know what's going on there.
It's pretty interesting. And even the official ceremony is a little unusual this time around because of extreme colds. They're moving it inside to the Capitol Rotunda,
Oh, wow.
which really limits how many people can attend.
It does. Yeah, that's only the second time that's happened since Reagan in 1985. I mean,
Well,
think about that. You're the average American. You want to witness this historic moment, but
yeah.
they're limiting access.
It makes you think about how this different setting, this change impacts how people view his return to power. Like, is this a sign of things to come?
Right.
What do you think?
Well, there are still protests happening in Washington, D.C. You know, people are concerned about reproductive rights, climate change, immigration.
Yeah. I've seen some talk online about this idea of an oligarchy,
Yeah.
like Elon Musk and these figures having so much influence.
Yeah, oligarchy basically means a small group of people controlling a country.
Okay.
So these protesters, they're worried about the power of the wealthy elite and how that will impact everyday life.
Okay, so these protests might be smaller than last time, but they're still a big deal, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they show that there's still opposition to Trump and his policies. It's a good reminder that not everybody is on board with this second term.
Definitely a lot to think about.
Yeah, and these protests bring up some huge questions about where American democracy is headed and the role of money and influence in our political system.
So Trump's already hinted at some pretty big policy moves right off the bat.
Yeah, he's hitting ground running.
We're talking mass deportations, potentially granting an extension to TikTok, and a bunch of executive orders that would reverse Biden-era policies.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there for sure. Think about the potential impact of all that.
Yeah.
Mass deportations, I mean, that could tear families apart. And then TikTok's future is up in the air, which raises questions about who controls the information we see.
And then there's this appointment that I think will really hit home for a lot of families.
Oh, yeah.
Trump's appointed Penny Schwinn to a key position in the Department of Education, and she's a huge supporter of school choice.
Interesting. So school choice, you know, it's a complex issue.
Yeah.
Some people argue it gives parents more power and leads to better education for kids, but others are worried about taking money away from public schools and making inequality worse.
Yeah, I see both sides.
Yeah, it's tough. And with Schwinn in this position, it could mean big changes for education, potentially affecting the quality of education that your kids have access to.
Definitely something to keep an eye on for sure.
Sure.
So we're seeing all this play out, and then on top of it all, we have this cryptocurrency thing.
Oh, yeah, I know we got to talk about that. This is completely uncharted territory, and it raises serious concerns about conflict of interest and the potential for abuse of power.
Yeah. I mean, it almost seems like he's creating a way for people to just give him money while he's in office.
Right.
And, this isn't the first time he's been accused of using the presidency for personal gain.
Yeah.
Remember all the stuff about his businesses during his first term?
Oh, yeah.
But this cryptocurrency venture feels different.
It does feel different, doesn't it?
It's like he's appealing directly to his supporters, tapping into that image of him as this disruptor, this outsider shaking things up.
Exactly.
But what are the consequences? I mean, what does this all mean for the average American? Could this set a dangerous precedent for future presidents?
It really could, and it raises some big questions about transparency and accountability in government. Like, how can we be sure that our elected officials are actually acting in the best interests of the people when their own financial interests are so closely tied to their political power?
That's a really good question.
Yeah, these are the kind of questions we need to be asking right now.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's this whole thing about Mayor Eric Adams meeting with Trump in Florida just a few days before the inauguration.
Oh, yeah. What's going on with that?
What is that all about?
The timing is very curious, especially with Adams facing that federal corruption trial coming up in April.
Yeah.
And of course, Trump has the power to pardon people.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard not to speculate about what they discussed.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
So Adams is in a tricky situation here.
He is.
He needs federal support from New York City, but he could also end up in jail.
Yeah, tough spot.
Tough spot to be in.
It really highlights how complex power and politics can be, especially at the local level. I mean, Adams is walking a tightrope here. He's got to balance the needs of his city with his own legal problems, and then you throw Trump into the mix, who's never been one to shy away from using his power for personal gain or political leverage.
It makes you wonder where Adams' priorities lie. Is he putting the city first, or is he more concerned about staying out of jail? And how does all this affect how people view our political institutions? Like, is this eroding trust even further?
It's definitely a lot to unpack.
Yes, we're seeing personal ambition, political maneuvering, ethical dilemmas, all converging. It's a reminder that decisions made in the halls of power, whether it's Washington or New York City, they have real consequences for everyday people.
Yeah, they do.
And it's important to hold our leaders accountable, no matter who they are or what party they belong to.
I agree.
So Trump's second inauguration is shaping up to be very different from his first. Lots of controversy, protests, potential policy changes.
For sure.
It raises questions about the future of American democracy, the influence of technology, money, and politics, and where the ethical lines are for people in public office.
It's a lot.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that beyond all the headlines and the political drama, there are real people whose lives will be directly impacted by the decisions being made right now. So we need to stay informed, have these conversations, and hold our leaders accountable for the choices they make.
It's a lot to digest, but hopefully this conversation has given you something to think about as we enter this new era of American politics.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens next.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of crazy to think about this cryptocurrency thing, this Trinity thing.
It's wild, isn't it?
This is totally new territory. Like, no president has ever done this, and it raises some serious red flags about, conflict of interest. Like, could he use this to benefit himself?
And could he abuse his power?
Exactly. I mean, it almost feels like he's setting up a system where people can just funnel money to him while he's in office, which is kind of unsettling, And this isn't the first time he's faced these kinds of accusations. Remember all this stuff about his businesses during his first term?
Oh, yeah. There were so many controversies back then.
Exactly. But this cryptocurrency thing, it feels different somehow.
It does, yeah. It feels more direct. Like he's reaching out to his supporters and saying, hey, invest in me. Invest in this idea of me as this, disruptor, this outsider who's going to shake things up.
Yeah, and it plays into that image he's cultivated for so long.
But what does it mean for the average person? Like, could this set a dangerous precedent for future presidents?
It could, yeah. It really makes you question the whole system, Like, how do we make sure our leaders are actually working for us when their own financial interests are so intertwined with their political power?
That's a huge question.
It is, and it's one we need to be asking ourselves right now.
For sure. And then you have this whole thing with Mayor Eric Adams meeting with Trump in Florida just days before the inauguration. It's like, what's going on there?
I know, right? The timing is super suspicious, especially since Adams is facing that federal corruption trial in April.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that.
And of course, Trump can pardon people, so it makes you wonder what they talked about.
It really does.
Adams is in a tough spot. He needs federal support for New York City, but he also doesn't want to go to jail.
Yeah. Talk about a rock in a hard place.
Right, exactly. It just shows you how messy politics can be, especially at the local level. Adams is trying to juggle all these different interests, his city's needs, his own legal troubles, and then you throw Trump into the mix, who's always looking for an angle.
It makes you wonder what Adams is really prioritizing here. Is he putting the city first, or is he more concerned about saving his own skin?
It's a valid question, and it raises concerns about the erosion of trust in our political system.
Yeah, like if our leaders are putting their own interests ahead of the people they're supposed to represent, where does that leave us?
Exactly. We're seeing a perfect storm of personal ambition, political maneuvering, and ethical dilemmas. It's a reminder that the decisions made by those in power have real consequences for everyday people, and we need to hold them accountable.
No matter what party they belong to.
Absolutely. You know what's really striking me is just the amount of uncertainty right now. Like, we're at the beginning of this second Trump presidency, and it feels like we're all just kind of holding our breath, waiting to see what's going to happen.
It really does feel like that. Yeah, like we're watching some kind of political thriller unfold right in front of us, all these power plays and ethical dilemmas and behind-the-scenes deals. It's hard not to get caught up in it all.
And the stakes are so high. I mean, everything we've been talking about, immigration, education, technology,
Hmm.
these issues affect millions of people. It feels like the very idea of American democracy is being put to the test.
And how does all this play out on the global stage? I mean, Trump's coming back at a time when things are already pretty tense internationally, with the economy and climate change and everything. How will his policies and his relationships with other world leaders affect things on a larger scale?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We can't predict the future, but we can definitely learn from the past and try to understand what the consequences might be, both here at home and abroad. What's important now is that we keep talking about these issues, keep having these conversations and trying to figure out what kind of future we want to build.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. How will Trump's second term impact your life, your family, your community? What can we learn from the past 4 years? And how can we as citizens play a role in shaping the future we want to see?
It's a time for critical thinking. You know, challenge your assumptions, have those tough conversations with people who might disagree with you. It's a time for courage, compassion, and a commitment to the values that make this country what it is.
It's been a wild ride so far, and it looks like we're in for a pretty bumpy next few years.
Buckle up. It's going to be interesting, that's for sure.